Tune in Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for episode 48 of Politically Conscious as President Trump tears down the East Wing of the White House, bragging he's funding the new ballroom himself, no taxpayer money. But is it just ego or a sign he plans to stay beyond his second term? Meanwhile, his $20 billion relief to Argentina and tariffs are crippling American farmers. The government is still shut down, but do Democrats really want free health care for illegal immigrants? If you're tired of the propaganda, listen to us. What's up, y'all? Welcome to episode 48 of Politically Conscious. Hopefully, most of y'all have been rocking with us. Emil just turned sideways some way, somehow. It's all good. And now he's the other way. So, hey, technical difficulties are part of our show. So just so y'all know, we're not the only three people on this show. But with that said, I am your host of the show, really the moderator between these two brothers here. We got Leo Smith. I'll let him introduce himself as Emil figures out his technical issues. But Leo, if you will, we like to talk about basically various political topics and look at clips from around the internet and give out both of your perspectives, you coming from the right and Emil obviously coming from the left. But if you will, just give a quick introduction and hopefully we can at least hear from Emil even if he's not on camera.
I am Leo Smith. I'm based out of Metro Atlanta, Georgia. I am a former Republican National Committee strategist and former executive with the Georgia Republican Party. Conservative, Republican, sort of in purgatory right now, mostly working, providing strategy now through my company, Engage Futures Group, building democracy's infrastructure for a time such as this. So I would say that now I kind of focus on being a democracy infrastructure strategist rather than a Republican strategist. But I am a hardcore conservative, and I love to give Emil, a little stomachache once in a while.
I like it. All right, Emil, tell them who you are, brother, and we're going to get to our first clip and get this conversation started and do what we do. We just lost your audio. We heard you laugh, then you went out on the talk. So technical difficulty is going to make itself known today. All right. So with that said, I'll introduce Emil and go to our first clip. Give it a shot, Emil. We can't hear you right now, so maybe come out and come back in. But I'll introduce Emil real quick. He's, again, our political consultant from the left. He's advised people running for Congress, people running for local government. And as he always says, he likes to ensure that his candidates tell the truth. I don't understand how he does it in politics, but that's always his focus. I think we hear you laughing. So, Emil, I think I gave a decent intro, so let's get to these cuts. We still can't hear you, just so you know. So come out and come back in and see if we can get a better connection with you audio-wise. Let's go to this first cut, y'all. This is a real quick one, talking about I would say the surprising news, political news out of everything that's been going on. I consider it somewhat surprising if it didn't surprise all of America, in my personal opinion. But I'll see what you guys think after I play the cut. Here we go.
It'll be built over on the east side. It won't interfere with the current building.
That's what President Trump said back in July about the construction of the ballroom here at the White House. Fast forward a few months, and White House officials now say that the entire East Wing is going to be demolished to make room for the president's construction project. Inside the West Wing here, President Trump just showed off renderings of how big the new ballroom will be. The footprint is nearly twice the size of the executive mansion here.
I think it'll be one of the great ballrooms anywhere in the world. It's about $300 million. It's set to do many, many things, including meetings of foreign leaders, including the honoring of foreign leaders.
And to be clear, not everybody is happy about it. The National Trust for Historic Preservation, as it's called, just sent a letter to the Trump administration warning them that the planned ballroom will overwhelm the White House. And now members of Congress are expressing their concerns.
We're talking about building a ballroom when we're trying to get the economy squared away. Timing's bad.
People are saying, the government's being destroyed. Well, now it looks like the White House is physically being destroyed.
But the White House says the scope and size of the ballroom has always been subject to change as the process here develops. And that project is being funded by President Trump himself and by private donors, including Comcast, NBC News' parent company.
Leo, we'll start with you. Any concerns? Again, I think it surprised people that this happened at this time, as you hear a couple of the senators allude to timing is terrible with everything that's going on with the economy. They're talking about the size of it being even bigger than the actual White House itself. Your thoughts on, and I guess one of the bigger issues that I think most Americans are concerned about I don't know if most Americans are concerned about it, but some of us are concerned that it's actually being financed, whereas President Trump says, hey, that's a good thing. It's not costing the taxpayers any money. This is politics. No money is given with no favors in return. But your thoughts on the East Wing being destroyed, Leo?
Well, if you're worried about favors in politics, then you're going to be worried for a long time and deeply traumatized in your life, because favors in politics they just go hand in hand. There's no way to avoid those things. The issue of whether or not this is something that people should be concerned about is one that I am, sort of mixed on, because in one hand, I just don't really personally, from a business point of view, don't understand all the trauma that folks are experiencing. But from understanding the psychology, some people call it Trump derangement syndrome, that people are feeling connected to holding on to some aspect of America that Trump isn't ruining or changing or making his mark on, that they're going to have to live with forever. So I think in part, from the way I see it, Montoya and Emil, these are people who, if someone that they trusted more, didn't have bad feelings about, was making a change to the White House, an idol, an icon of America, then they would be less concerned about this. But because it's Trump, I think that folks are a little bit more concerned, which really is a practical need for the White House, a ballroom.
Emil, your thoughts on the East Wing being demolished? We still can't hear you, brother, unfortunately.
Oh, man, and we really need to hear him, too, on this. So, Emil, it might be your audio source. You might want to check it.
Yeah, we cannot hear you, brother. We heard you for a second earlier, but I didn't see the earphones in your ear when we heard you earlier. Is there a possibility that you can do it without the earphones? Because we cannot hear you. I feel like I heard you before you had the earphones. Did you not come on initially this morning without them? We cannot hear you. Did you? I felt like you were on this morning without them when you first got on. I don't know. I just seem like you. I don't know if you had them on when you first came on. I didn't see them.
I know I did, and I'm trying to figure out what's going on.
I can hear you.
Hear you.
Yeah.
Okay. Leo, my brother, I love you and I appreciate your perspective. You're an optimist, but here's the problem. First of all, this ballroom is illegal by all the standards of legality for building on the National Mall and the White House. There is a planning commission whose job is to ensure that the history of the National Mall specifically, is called the Capital Planning Commission, is preserved. That Planning Commission never had a chance to review or approve these plans. There is a check and balance in place to prevent this very thing from happening. So when you say people are concerned about it being an idol and a symbol and all those sorts of things, that's absolutely true. But it's also a representative of the other problems with this administration. Bulldoze a giant portion of the executive mansion so that it can build whatever the hell it wants without anyone overseeing the process. The reason why you use taxpayer dollars is so you have taxpayer oversight on the building. So now you have a multi-tiered problem. First, it's a distraction from the real issues going on with the destruction of our democracy. Two, you're seeing that this president does not care one whit about checks and balances, and this executive mansion action is proof. And three, you have a bunch of sycophants who will do whatever the president asks, even though he is not authorized to do it simply because the president said so. When you put all those together and you add the donors on top of that, which is an unchecked system, and I know what you said, Leo, and I appreciate what you said, that donors ask for favors. It's not just American history, it's all political history since the Greeks invented the system that we use today. However, we also know that there's at least a modicum of transparency when there's taxpayer dollars involved. When you take out that modicum of transparency, people got to ask, what does Google, what does Apple, Amazon, the Winklevoss brothers, what do they want, or what did they already negotiate in secret? And no one knows the answer. And oh, by the way, this god-awful monstrosity of a ballroom does not comport in any way with the architecture of the National Mall. So on top of all of that, you have this man who thinks gold-plated toilets are a thing, helping designing probably in his head what he thinks is the world's greatest ballroom. No, no, and no on all fronts. This is not just unacceptable. It is not just unreasonable. It is unconstitutional. And it's not just me saying that. Look at the people who are sending letters, who are actual historians and constitutional experts, who are saying this is a representative of an administration gone amok.
Well, how do they know that is not representative of the architectural standards and decorum of the mall if they haven't looked at the plans yet? Because, I mean, and what I'm hearing from a lot of people with your position, Emil, is that they hate something they haven't even seen yet.
Well, we're not going to wait until it's built to hate it. Come on, man. You got to be more reasonable than that, Leo. You can't say, oh, I think it's going to. If you put a 90,000 square foot ballroom in front of the White House, which is not that big, then you're going to have a monstrosity. It doesn't matter unless it was approved by the Capital Planning Commission, you have to assume it's bad. And the reason why it's bad isn't because it hasn't been built yet, therefore I hate it. It's because it hasn't gone through the proper channels. It's bad because it hasn't been approved by the people whose job is to approve such a building.
Is it possible that those people can now get engaged and make sure that he complies?
The problem is he's already destroyed part of the historic mansion.
Well, yeah,
this is something that should never have been initiated without that proper and thorough vetting process. So now we have destruction, and this is the problem with this administration. They break things and don't ask for permission later. So you have a problem that will not be solved because it's already been done.
Well, you and I agree that it is by design that this administration breaks things. That's what they're doing, and they push the limits to make sure they can get away with their own authority as much as possible. I have issues with that, but I also see the strategy in that, in a hegemonic space, a place where people are hyper partisan, and no matter what he does, he's not going to get a lot of help from people who just don't like him. So I can understand why he would say, I'll ask for forgiveness later. I get it. I don't mean to make.
He's not even going to ask for forgiveness, though, Leo. That's the problem. He doesn't even see himself as anything other than the God King of the United States in that context. And don't question me on that, because he put that kind of imagery over people during No King's Day. So I don't want to hear that he doesn't think of himself as a king.
I've got one of our watchers says the construction is great. Now events can be held in a luxury space and not under a tent on the White House lawn. Brother Bianchi also says the structure is designed by licensed architects and structural engineers. And one more comment by him as well, and we'll move to the next cut. It says DC Building Commission has approved construction permits upon reception of approved drawings. Only one line, quick thought today, either one of y'all, and then I'm gonna go to another.
Can we confirm that though? Because that's different information than what Emil was just saying.
Okay.
So
no, I'm talking about the Capital Planning Commission, not the DC Building Commission. The DC Building Commission does everything municipal to DC. The Capital Planning Commission does the National Mall and other federal spaces on in the District of Columbia. I do not confuse the two. And just because they got permission doesn't mean or even licensed architects. I can show you some of the ugliest buildings on the planet who, by any measure of the imagination, that were built by licensed architects.
No, respect it. Let's get to the next cut. Brother, just so y'all know, Brother Bianchi was in that space. So I knew his information is correct. I will give him that much. All right, let's go to our next cut, because I think this is an additional issue that people are concerned about. I don't know if we should be, but they feel like, hey, is he building this ballroom with any plans to leave? So let's have that discussion if we
going to get a third term. So Trump 28, Trump is going to be president in 28, and people just ought to get accommodated with that.
So what about the 22nd Amendment?
There's many different alternatives. At the appropriate time, we'll lay out what the plan is, but there's a plan. We had longer odds in 16 and longer odds in 24 than we got in 28. And President Trump will be the president of the United States, and the country needs him to be president of the United States. We have to finish what we started. Trump is a vehicle. I know this will drive you guys crazy, but he's a vehicle of divine providence. He's an instrument. He's very imperfect. He's not churchy, not particularly religious, but he's an instrument of divine will. And you could tell this of how he's pulled this off. We need him for at least one more term, right? And he'll get that in 28.
You're not driving me crazy. I'm trying to understand the coherence of the things you've just told me. On the one hand, you've said the Constitution is fit for purpose. Secondly, you've said that President Trump needs another term, even though the 22nd Amendment makes pretty clear that he cannot have another term.
Why does it make that clear?
Because he's on his second term already.
At some point in time, we will make sure we go through, Zanny, and define all those terms.
But you will be undermining the spirit of that amendment, even if you find some way around it.
If the American people, with the mechanisms we have, put Trump back in office, are the American people tearing up the Constitution? Would that be tearing up?
Well,
would the American people be going against the spirit of the Constitution, ma'am?
I think yes, actually, because I think what you will end up with is a populist justification for a quasi-dictatorship.
That's not true at all.
That's what it sounds like.
It's not. Trump is a dictatorship. Did you just see the compromises he had to make on the big, beautiful bill? You see the compromises he has to do on everything, on accommodating Zelensky, on what President Trump. President Trump is nothing but a series of negotiations to kind of keep this thing rolling forward, where he's having trade-offs all the time.
Steve, you've just spent the last 20 minutes telling me we have to smash the other side. There's no room for debate. There's no room for compromise. We must smash them. And now you're telling me this is a negotiation. I mean, that's
no.
I think that's why it seems to me some kind of tension there.
The only way President Trump wins in 2028 and continues to stay in office is by the will of the American people. Okay? And the will of the American people is what the Constitution embodies. And so I think we're going to be in good hands there. We need to finish what we started.
Let you start. There is the infamous Steve Bannon. I don't think we've ever played a cut by him on our 47 previous episodes, but we've mentioned his name as, in a sense, being the man behind a lot of what I think your concerns are, and you hear him publicly saying, hey, the third term will happen. And again, people are relating this big, as you called it, monstrosity of a ballroom, that I like how Leo hit you and said, you ain't seen it yet, but it's all good. I'm moderating here, but I'll say that this big monstrosity of the ballroom, knowing Trump's history, like you said, the gold toilets, having done that with the Trump Plaza and all these type of things in the past. Now he's building this ballroom. Does he plan to leave? According to Steve O'Bannon, he does not. Your thoughts, brother?
Yeah, so my thoughts are he is absolutely 100% serious. He's not joking. He's not trolling. And if we don't take him seriously, there will be a constitutional crisis, the likes of which we have not seen since the Civil War. And I'm not trying to be what's the word I'm looking for, Leo? Exaggerate too much. I am not trying to be that man. I'm trying to be as serious as possible. Steve Bannon is one of the architects of the strategy you're seeing executed right now in the government. He's not the only one, but he's one of the main ones. And I'm here to tell you that if you don't listen to him, you will see it. This president is serious about running for a third term, or just being the president for a third term. And the Constitution is very clear. When Steve Bannon says the will of the people is what is the spirit of the Constitution, I can remember 70 years ago that the will of the people was to oppress a certain minority group in this country. It was the will of the people to kill Native people on this land. It was the will of the people to do all sorts of awful, definitely unconstitutional things that they said were constitutional. This is one of those moments where we cannot be of any other mind, conservative, liberal, it doesn't matter. What matters is that everyone agrees the 22nd Amendment of the Constitution is very clear. You get to serve 2 terms, period, dot, have a nice day. And there's no way around that. There is no alternative. There is no fake news here. It's just pure and simple. Read the text of the Constitution. It's plain black and white. It's not, there's no room for interpretation. You can go back to President Clinton, where everybody made fun of him, where he said, it depends on what your definition of is. No, there's no definitions here.
From the beginning of time, whether you call it from the premortal soup or from that moment in the Garden of Eden or whatever is evolution or whatever you want to believe, there have been people with crazy ideas and thoughts. Steve Bannon is one of them in this epic of time. So he has crazy ideas and thoughts. The guy literally has said that he wants to see a race war. He's game for all of that. Okay. So I laugh when we were showing him, because I think he's a joke. Okay. But at the same time, Americans like being entertained. They like having confirmation bias. And yes, a lunatic can lead people into doing lunacy. So yes, you should take seriously what he's saying. But the way to take it seriously is by paying attention to what the 22nd Amendment is, paying attention to what he himself says, the will of the people. So he's not actually saying, I'm defending Steve Bannon in a way here. He's not saying that we're going to blow the Constitution away and not pay attention to it. He's not saying that we're not going to pay attention to the will of the people. He didn't even say that we're not going to have an election. He didn't say any of that. So what we have to prepare to do is to make sure that we do have an election, make sure that we abide by the Constitution and we insist on the Constitution being followed. And we have to make sure that when the election happens, people, whether Donald Trump is as a write-in or whatever, that you have some candidates that you can get behind, that you get off of your butts and you don't repeat what happened in 2024. That's up to you, not Steve Bannon. And so anybody who's going crazy about all of this stuff, I hope to see that you can pull 500 people to go vote. You, one person, go get 500 people to vote, because I think you're going to need every effort to make sure that these rights and ideas you have about American justice and fairness are maintained. We did it once. Everything that Emil just said that was once wrong with America, we overcame those things and we did the right thing for the dignity and the preservation of e pluribus unum, out of many one. We've done it before. We've overcome despots and lunatics before. We can do it again.
One comment from one of our Brother Pianki again. He says, the state elects the president. The federal government gets its powers from the state. Popular votes do not place U.S. presidents. Any response to either one of y'all from that? Is again,
yeah, Brother Pianki is talking about the Electoral College, and he's absolutely correct. And that is one of the concerns, is that Steve Bannon and others are going to try to figure out an end run around how things are done. We know that the popular vote is not the best way, but we also know the Electoral College is the residue of slavery in this nation. We know both of those things are true.
But Emil, come on, man. If we do a convention of the states, right, to change the election process, even if we go through the Electoral College, Trump is not going to win all the states. But that again, even the electors, how are the electors determined? The electors is determined by the popular vote of the state, not federally, but of the state. So if Trump wins North Carolina, he gets the electors to then be able to vote from the Republican Party. Again, y'all, you have to not participate. You have to willingly have so much apathy, be so downtrodden and woe is us, that you don't get out there and do what you should do. The same reason why Kamala Harris lost.
I agree with you, Leo, that we need to get off our butts. And you and I are not people who sit on those butts. We have been active parts of our political process for decades. But what I'm trying to get people to understand is that this end run around the Constitution, even if it means modifying the Constitution so he can run a third term, or that somehow they figure out how to get him on the ballot in all 50 states, this is a serious matter that all of us need to pay attention to. And I'm sounding the alarm on this one because the president is printing material that says Trump 2028. He's printing material and getting ready to actually declare himself a candidate for 2028.
Let me jump in real quick and we'll go to the next cut. So when listening to both of you go back and forth, sounding the alarm sounds like, if I'm listening to Leo, it's about what we're able to do to clearly make this not happen. That's when you add what Leo is saying to this. So when you say, for example, to modify the Constitution, I think that would be such an obvious answer that the bipartisanship would not be a problem. So, but I hear, which again, as Leo's saying, there's always been crazy people, right? Like at the end of the day, and that's it, whether it's in the United States or any other place in the world, there's always been crazy people. But at the end of the day, a lot of what happens that we consider crazy in retrospect, when you look at the situation, what I think I hear Leo saying is, to a degree, the people of that country or our country at various times, in a sense, allowed it to happen. And Leo's pointed out that, if you go to Martin Luther King's speech of, I'm misquoting it terribly, but that the things lean towards righteousness, if you will. Leo's just pointing out that all efforts to turn around what has happened in this country was left up to us. So I think what Leo's saying is, be not afraid because you can do something about it. I don't necessarily saying that you're suggesting that people should be afraid per se, but I do feel like some of like saying modify the Constitution, I would have to wait till that's done before I speak on that. If that makes sense. I don't know if
I'm not waiting because I know the tea leaves. Here's the problem, Montoya, that people like me and Leo can read the tea leaves, and it's a matter of interpretation, but we're all seeing the same picture. Let me help you out. There is a way to amend the Constitution through the state legislatures, and the state legislatures right now lean heavily Republican and heavily conservative. So there is a way for that to happen that is not necessarily bipartisan. And they've been planning on this for about 20 years that they had this opportunity. This is not me saying, the sky is falling. This is what's actual fact. If you look at how the census has been interpreted and how it's been used over the last 20 years specifically, you see that these opportunities are being more and more clearly presented as options for modifying the Constitution. I'm not here to tell you that it can't be done. I'm telling you it can be done, and there's been preparation for the last 20 years to do it.
And so I'm going to go ahead and agree with Emil that it can be done.
Okay.
Which is why I'm saying, folks, lean into this.
Right.
Now, here's where I differ from Emil.
Okay.
I'm saying it can be done, and if it gets done, is what the people deserve, because you deserve what you work on. So there's an easy way to stop it. There's an easy way to stop it, but only if you deserve it. And you don't deserve it if you're not working at the state and local level to build the relationships to make your voice and what you think the Constitution ought to do and what you think states' rights ought to be. You get to determine that. But if you don't get off of your butt and go get involved at the state level, stop playing this little romantic interest, this entertainment interest in all this stuff at the federal level, when the power that Emil just described to you is going to happen at your state house. If you don't stop focusing on all your attention on Congress and start focusing some attention on your state house, you're going to get what you deserve.
Amen. And let me jump in. Let me put one little stamp on this. Go ahead.
I got to keep moving. Emil, I have to keep moving. Sorry. Got to keep moving, brother. All right. This is a cut that you actually want to talk about. So let's get into it.
Okay, so we gotta talk about the No Kings protests, because first of all, they're not protests. They're rallies. Protest is meant to demonstrate the might of the people to the ruling class, to the powers that be. It's supposed to make them shook. So if your protest has a beginning time, doesn't disrupt anything, baby, that's not resistance.
She's wrong. She's unequivocally wrong. I mean, by that matter, the March on Washington was not necessarily a protest. We like to think it was Martin Luther King's march, but A. Philip Randolph and Bayard Rustin had already created that plan in 1941.
Now, a rally is meant to rally folks around an idea, a team. We can call the No Kings a rally because it's only happening for 2 hours. From 10 to 12. It's also requiring people to register. What kind of actual protest would essentially incriminate its participants by having them put their information into a database? Protest is meant to demonstrate the might of the people to the ruling class, to the powers that be. It's supposed to make them shook.
According to Merriam-Webster, the definition of a protest is a solemn declaration of opinion and usually of dissent, or a complaint, objection, or display of unwillingness, usually to an idea or a course of action. That's a protest. So we can't define protest by the risk or the reaction of white people. Remember, the Selma to Montgomery March began when people in Selma were going to the jail to just sing Negro spirituals. And Martin Luther King says in the letter to a Birmingham jail, nonviolent direct action seeks to create a crisis and foster a tension that a community which has constantly refused to negotiate is forced to confront the issue. In a sense, the No Kings and the Indivisible stuff is not necessarily a direct action. And we can ascribe all of these other ancillary characteristics to it. But when you whittle it down to its essential meaning, a protest is any act that expresses disapproval. I understand why so many people are conflicted about these demonstrations or resistant to joining them. Marches, sit-ins, and other acts of nonviolence resistance have been whitewashed down to just nonviolence. All Black liberation movements are a fight against tyranny, a fight against authoritarianism, a fight against the fascism that we have experienced in this country. And now that white people are experiencing it and are deciding to get out in the street and do the easiest part of what we did, we can sometimes feel like, where the fuck were y'all this whole time? I think the question is, do we embrace these Johnny come latelys or Karen come latelys or Chad come latelys, or do we say, I told you so? I don't know the answer to that. But what I do know is that we won't be able to fight this authoritarian regime without a mass movement.
You are listening to Contraband.
Harriet, author. It's your turn, Leo, to respond first, so I'll let you respond. Emil definitely wanted to talk about No Kings. We were actually even considering a pop-up show during the actual Saturday of, and I said, Emil, and this is good for new listeners to hear. I said, well, what we do is basically evaluate things kind of in a sense after they've happened. So the No Kings protest has taken place, and so we definitely wanted to give some voice to maybe y'all perspective on it. I thought that was just a beautiful dialogue that Michael Harriet had critiquing Amanda Seales, just her viewpoint, saying, hey, this is just a rally, kind of reducing it down to that. And I thought Michael Harriet, appropriately, as he always does, bring in some history to what protests can and do look like in the definition of, and I'm not siding with either one, but I thought it was a great way to introduce and get y'all responses to what happened on this past Saturday. So Lee, I'll start with you, and Emil, go to you next.
In the totem pole, the hierarchy of authoritative speakers who might have integrity about that which they speak, that might have some proof of concept and some background in education to prove it, is rare that I will say a journalist is by far and above the most reasoned and rational person here. Mr. Harriet was concise, clear, and also very instructive in a very helpful way of how we can create movement, and movement can create the opportunity to engage people, to activate those people. The other lady, maybe she went to college, she got a degree in African American studies, but she's primarily a comedian. She's a content creator promoting herself. And you've heard me and Malcolm X, yes, I'm positioning like that, both say that we got to be real careful with these actors and actresses and entertainers, these comedians, these people who just like to be looked at. I'm not saying that about her, but that's what she appears to be. I just want to make that clear.
Now, good stuff. Emil, your thoughts. Again, I know this was an issue that you thought we needed to speak about. So it's happened, and we got this cut to kind of give you some thoughts on.
So you watch the administration try to position these protests as anti-American. Well, guess what? Throughout American history, every protest has been by the administration has tried to make those protests anti-American. In fact, if you go back to the Boston Tea Party, those protests were countenanced by the British as anti-British, as anti-king. So we have a tradition in America that when we protest, however we protest, and this is what Amanda Seales misses in her analysis and what a lot of people are missing, a protest isn't a visible on the street protest. Thurgood Marshall protested in the courtroom. And the brother from Beatrice Foods, whose name just slipped my mind, Reggie, I can't think of his name. You guys know what I'm talking about. He was protesting in the boardroom. Protesting doesn't look like signs and marches that say, I am a man and we shall overcome. Protests look like going against the grain of the mainstream when it's time for justice to be served to the mainstream from those who have been oppressed by the mainstream. However that happens, that is a protest. And what Amanda Seales misses in her analysis that Michael Harriet got right is that it doesn't matter what form it takes. It matters the effect it causes. And right now, the president and his team were shook that millions of Americans came out of the woodwork. Now, people are making fun of people in Portland for wearing chicken suits, but you know what they're doing? They're denying the propaganda opportunities by wearing chicken suits. A chicken suit is a very clear protest against a very specific way of being seen or treated. And people say that's not a protest, that's clowning. You know what? We thought that Dr. King was thought of by Black people in America at one time as potentially the worst agitator and the worst disruptor in race relations in America. So we can't just say that it's one way for protests to happen or change to occur. And by the way, the quote from Dr. King is the arc of the moral universe bends toward righteousness, right? So we want to be very clear that these protests, when they're done in multiple ways, if they're really sparked by the people who are trying to do the right thing, they will help that moral arc bend toward righteousness.
The main definition of a protest is that you're making a protest against something. And I don't agree with the No Kings rallies necessarily, but the definition of the name, No Kings, is what they're against. So they're stating, she doesn't even use her own definition to apply to the situation. Will we please stop listening to these celebrities and entertainers?
Yeah, again, that's what politically conscious is about, is just getting to the nitty gritty and not being the group, in a sense, a group who does that, right? And the one thing I'll say, and we'll move on, I remember just getting into a social media dialogue about the No Kings protest with one of our members, just a quick dialogue. And she was just, her perspective was, let's do something, let's focus on our economics in the Black community versus being part of the protest. And I just kind of highlighted just to kind of get it, because we put everything in such a far right or far left perspective. And I just kind of reminded us as, hey, some people could be going to that protest, or today they may be going to the park all day with their kids. I was just kind of highlighting it's not a lot of additional time. And those very same people could also be a part of the economic movement that you're pushing right now. So sometimes you have to kind of just put things in perspective, in the sense that somebody could actually participate in that protest and still be very involved in a way that you think they should. We sometimes make the assumption that if somebody's doing that, they're not going to be involved in a more important matter. Go ahead, Emil.
A healthy democracy, both Leo and Montoya, you will agree, is noisy and messy and slow and ugly in the context of what government should be. And part of the problem with a lot of people is they want America and other democratic republics and democracies look very clean and smooth and efficient. And the problem with efficiency is it allows someone to become a dictator with less resistance than otherwise necessary. And the founders of this nation, as much as they were flawed as human beings, they were brilliant as legislators. And one of the things they wrote in the Constitution was a messiness, a slowness, a process that prevented mob rule from installing a dictator. They definitely did not want kings. So the No Kings protest, people are like, we don't have a king. The problem with saying we don't have a king, what are you protesting, is we don't want a king. So we're out trying to tell the government right now, do not pave the way for a dictator. This is how we do that. We're saying to the government, to the people who are supposed to be in charge and use the checks and balances in the Constitution the right way, that check your government before we end up with no government and one man rules us all. That is what the No Kings protest is about. And when people are disingenuous and try to say it's being funded by people, let's go back 60 years. Guess what they said about the protests and the marches and all the things? They said there are these nefarious communists, nefarious socialists, nefarious forces that are funding all of these things going on. But you know what they're not saying? Thank you for all of those quote unquote nefarious forces bringing us to where we are today.
Then we got Brother Piucchi saying what you're talking about right now. He says the underlying forces are funding protests like No Kings. They want to destroy the fabric of the United States. One more comment by that brother. Says the United States is moving towards a Star Trek model society. Prepare your children. I would love Star Trek, but I don't know if I
laugh at that because Star Trek model society is a society with no money. And right now, as we saw with the building of this monstrosity of a ballroom, money is absolutely taking charge right now.
But he's right that you do need to prepare your children.
Oh, amen to that. That sentence is 100% correct.
And he is right that there are people who fund crazy stuff, and he's right about that too. But I mean, again, we have to make sure that the signal of righteousness that bends towards right justice, that signal is stronger than the noise.
Fair enough. All right, let's get into another bigger issue, I think, of even all the things that we've been talking about. Let's go here.
Trump just made a post on Truth Social and talking about China purposely stopped buying American soybeans and that it's an economically hostile act. Then he threatened to stop buying cooking oil from China. I am here to help you to understand what he's actually talking about. Let's break it down. First, China used to be the biggest buyer of U.S. soybeans. Most of the soybeans are for cooking oils or for animals, cows and pigs and chickens, all that kind of stuff. This is not hostility. That's economics. This is capitalism, which American politicians love it until it doesn't work in their favor. When you tax and threaten your main customer, they move to another suppliers. That's how free trade works. Now, you probably already know, but Trump didn't mention the U.S. Treasury recently approved about $20 billion of financial package for Argentina. Political aid to, disguise as economic support. Basically, the U.S. want Milei to stay in place, and that's why they give him the money. Right after that, Argentina cut export tax on soybeans, and China immediately bought around 20 ships of Argentine soybeans, which carry about 65,000 tons. So U.S. taxpayers' money ended up helping Argentina undercut U.S. farmers. This logic is just mind-blowing. This is not foreign victory. This is self-inflicted damage. Now the cooking oil thing. The U.S. does not really buy cooking oil from China. It buys used cooking oil, waste oil, grease, connected from restaurants to make biodiesel, jet fuels, and those oils powers trucks and planes, not really kitchens. The reality is the trade war does not really hurt China's government. They hurt American farmers. They hurt the same working class who voted for him, and because they believe that he was fighting for them. And every time when working class hurt, it is always the government's fault. It's incompetence of the government. The social dynamic or the social antagonism is always between the ordinary working class people and the government. If the people hurt, it's government's fault. So you don't have to blame left and right or that kind of culture, or that kind of crap. It's government's incompetence. Anyway, I have more videos like this on Substack, link in bio, or visit grumpychinese.com.
Emil, if you're available, Emil's not available on either. Go. Okay, Emil, are you available? I'm gonna let you respond.
I'm here. Yeah.
All right, go ahead, brother. Your thoughts? I feel like it's just a good clip. It kind of explains some specifics. Again, we're politically conscious, so that's our goal, is to educate in addition to raise people's political consciousness. So I just thought it was a fair. I don't know the guy's name. I wish I did to give him credit.
He broke it down brilliantly, Montoya. He broke it down very succinctly, and it's as simple as it sounds. But let's pour salt on that, on all that cooking oil and soybeans, because the other side of this is that the president of the United States has a dear friend that he's trying to prop up in Argentina as the president of that nation, and he's about to offer them $20 billion to buy their beef, which is going to undercut United States beef suppliers, because cattle ranchers are about to go apoplectic. They're about to go crazy over this move. Why? Because Brazil used to be the main importer of beef. Now there are tariffs on Brazil's imports of beef. So we're trying to find another source for that beef. But at the same time, American farmers whose exports of beef have been hit by tariffs are now going to have competition by money that we're sending to Argentina for the purpose of sending their beef here instead of buying American beef from the people who make it here after they've been hit by these tariffs. So this is a double whammy. Soybean farmers and cattle ranchers are both being undercut by this administration very purposefully, not for economics, not even for political power, but because one man wants one thing from another man, and they're both presidents of their respective nations. This is a very clear opportunity for people to see just who he will sacrifice if it means preserving what he believes is his power base.
Leo?
I trust Trump on this. Here's a big pen, call it China. The people in America don't trust China. don't want to be dependent on China and wants to reduce the dependence on China. Tariffs come along and there's a negotiating and leverage point for China. And here's Argentina. They don't have the size of soybean production, but they have a need to buttress up the peso. So here comes America and says, okay, I'm going to buttress up this guy so that he will owe me, and I'll be able to negotiate by buttressing his source of money, the pesos, with the US dollar. Now I got big leverage to replace this supplier. Bye. Hello, better partner.
See, the problem with that analysis or analogy, Leo, and I'm just going to confront you on this one, is China is a much more comprehensive supplier and a much better customer than what Argentina will ever be in terms of supply and or demand of our products. So trying to use that as a lever, I think, is a fool's errand. You've got a multi-billion-dollar partner, and you've got Argentina. Now, I've read enough about Argentina, and you can go and read a lot about them too. But the problem with Argentina is their economy, no matter who's in charge of it, tends to go through these cycles of boom and bust, hyperinflation and low inflation. So this stability that you think is coming through this negotiation is only going to happen at the expense of American farmers and cattle ranchers. And I'm not cool with that. I want them to have what they want, what they had in the past, which was a very large, very stable customer for their very important products that we actually could have made a lever against China had we used it differently.
Let me jump in real quick, say this one thing. I think you misrepresented some of what Leo said when you said the stability that he thinks is coming. Leo said the dependency was the focus. And I'm not saying one.
He also said there was a customer relation or a relationship, an economic relationship between us and Argentina that will not happen to the same degree as it would with China.
So you may have to have multiple countries where you do this with. I mean, it's going to be a long, slow process. It will not be overnight. It's not like going to the grocery store and getting a can of Campbell's soup. You're going to have to develop your sources. Just like we tell people, yeah, you can't, if you're going to boycott Walmart, for instance, right? If you're going to boycott Target, then you may have to go to a couple of different retail spots that are Black owned, that are aligned with your social value or whatever it is. You're not going to get it just by having the comfort that you're used to. What Americans have to do when it comes to, if we want to protest against an oppressive regime or society or whatever, including the one that you might think is in DC, you're going to have to be uncomfortable sometimes, including some farmers are going to have to be uncomfortable too. I am willing to pay more for goods and products. I am willing to search other places for soybeans if it means not being part of oppressive societies.
I understand what you're saying, but my problem.
I gotta keep us moving. Sorry, brother.
I'll just say this:
keep us moving.
Follow the money and find out who Scott Bessent's friends are and how they funded Argentina.
I gotta keep us moving. I'm gonna give a comment. Kenny says Argentina has a economic crisis every 20 years. All right, Camille already mentioned that. So good stuff. Again, want to make sure we keep our listeners, watchers happy as well. Let me make this move into the government is still shut down because I got some more cuts to get to.
The Democrats shut down our government, not the Republicans. Let me explain it to you. In order to advance the funding bill, you need a bare minimum of 60 Senate votes in order to do that. There are currently only 53 Republican senators. That means that you need at least 7 Democratic senators to come over and decide to work across party lines to get the funding bill passed and get the government back open. So I repeat, this is a Democratic government shutdown. It is not a Republican shutdown. They are lying to you the same way they lied to you about the Civil Rights Act. When the Civil Rights Act was in the Senate, there was 21 Senate Democrats that opposed the Civil Rights Act, and they opposed it so badly that they were willing to filibuster. They had one of the longest historic filibusters on record, and they held it hostage and fought it and opposed it with everything that they had for as long as they could. Only 6 Senate Republicans opposed it. The majority of Senate Republicans were in favor of the Civil Rights Act. But just like they did during the Civil Rights era in the 1960s, they're holding progress in the country hostage and people's livelihood hostage to get their way. So I repeat, this is a Democratic government shutdown. The Democrats were willing to shut down our government, to say, forget us and our needs, because all they want is their fraud. They want their fraud and their abuse. So if you're upset about this, write your Democratic senator. If you didn't get your check, write your Democratic senator. If you want the government back open, write your Democratic senator. Because they are the person who holds the ability to reopen our government. It's not the Republicans. And they will continue to lie to you until you start to truly seek the truth.
So I'll start with you, Leo. That's Christine Maxwell, Republican candidate for Illinois senator, if I looked her up correctly, giving her perspective on the shutdown. We have to continue to talk about the shutdown because obviously we're still in it. Emil and Shelley, I think both did a great job last week saying at the end of the day, this is not a Democrat or a Republican shutdown. We should all have an issue with all, as Emil said last week, all 535 Congress people. We should have an issue with all of them. But you hear Christine Maxwell putting her spin on it, if you will. And so my simple question is, how much is what she's saying is accurate and how much is spin from your perspective, Leo?
Well, I mean, she has some spin because she's clearly partisan, okay? But the nonpartisan piece is that the Democrats did shut down the government. And that's because the government was open until they decided not to accept the continuing resolution, which I have right here in my hand. Okay, I read the thing, and look, this was a continuation of what Americans were benefiting from. Yes, there is something that is inspiring in this, right, Emil? And I know you're going to talk about it, so I won't. There's something that's inspiring in it. If all they did was said, okay, let's talk about the piece that's inspiring, that'd been fine, but that's not what they did. Division B, Title I, in the subtitle A section of the public health extenders from the person who presented the counter resolution, right, actually includes other stuff. It includes a bunch of other stuff. And so what the Republicans said, hey, the car is running down the street. We're going to continue to go to the destination, continue driving the car, but don't tell me to pick up any riders that I don't know about. And the Democrats are like, no, we want you to pick up these riders. They were protesting. That's what it is. Let's just call it what it is.
Let me ask this, Emil, again.
Yeah.
What was spin or what was accurate about what she said? Obviously, you got Leo, like I said, haven't read the actual resolution, if you will. And so I know the big sticking point that I keep hearing, I was going to play a cut to it, but I'll just ask it real plainly here. I think one of the pick the riders, as Leo gives us that analogy that they're trying to pick up is, and you broke this down on the last show, but maybe you got new watchers today or new viewers today, where the biggest thing that they're worried about picking up, and I keep seeing said, is healthcare to illegal immigrants. That's the thing that Republicans seem to be saying, if you take that out, we might can work with you, I think. And then there's even comments about no negotiations are even happening, which I hope are not true. But again, help us weed through all of this, brother.
Yeah, so, I spoke on it last time. I'll speak on it again, that there is no federal money going to support illegal immigrants through in healthcare. But what there is state money that does that in certain states. And the state money that's going to illegal immigrants may be backfilled with federal dollars. And the federal government, the Congress is saying, we don't want any of that. So you got to stop it. If you're going to use your money, but don't use federal money to backfill your state coffers. That is part of the problem here. But the one big problem is the One Big Beautiful Bill Act that said certain things, which included taking away the subsidies for Obamacare. Those subsidies pre-existed the pandemic. They were hundreds of billions of dollars of subsidies that kept healthcare accessible for people of moderate means. What the Democrats are saying is, yes, pick up this rider because you broke the thing in the bill you just passed. That is the problem. Now, the regular order of business would be that you would amend the One Big Beautiful Bill Act after you did all of this continuing resolution stuff. The Democrats put a line in the sand and said, we're not going to wait for you guys to basically filibuster would be the right word, although it's used outside of the context of the Senate. But we're not going to let you just negotiate yourselves and negotiate this into oblivion until it doesn't matter. You're seeing the Democrats finally show a backbone on something very important. The problem is, as we said last week, Montoya and Leo, is that the American people are suffering. So if I'm going to tell you something, it'll be this. She spins the history of the civil rights movement. We can talk about that in another conversation. She spins the fact that it's only 7 Democrats that need to come across the aisle, because although it's technically true, there's a reason why those 7 Democrats have told a specific line. And she spins the fact that they're only doing it for fraud. That was pure spin. And anytime you hear the word fraud without any detail, you know it's spin, because fraud is a very delicate matter that requires a lot of detail and time to unpack. And she did not do that because she knew she was spinning the entire situation.
So anybody watching, I'm going to reiterate the last part of what Emil said. When you hear fraud used by politicians without specific context, regardless of who the politician is, whether they're on the right or left, they're using it for you to feel the way you feel. They're making you say, oh, that other side, they want you to feel they're evil. That's why they throw the word fraud. If you think they're evil and you react from a visceral place, they got you. So just know that the word fraud used very loosely by any politician is catering to our emotions. Again, we're politically conscious. So we're challenging you not to allow the word fraud by either party to throw you off base. If they speak fraud, make them give you the details, because now there is a real investigation that has figured out and weeded out the fraud. That is very different than Emil making the point when somebody just says it without context. You should know, oh, my side is spinning me, because typically we're listening to the side we like already. So just know when they do that, they're spinning you. All right, let me keep this thing moving. We got Brother Pioki says Medicaid has to be a state program, not carried out by the federal government. Says medical expenses should be allowed to expire. Was another thought from him. All right, let's go to this one. Is something that I told y'all to look at. So we're going to play part of it. So anybody out there watching, this clip is a little longer than what we typically play. I just wanted to give a lot of context, because luckily we have Brother Emil who can break down everything you're about to hear. So what you're about to hear is a little technical. I don't even know that I understand all of it, but again, that's what we're here for. So Emil, I'll definitely let you respond first, and specifically what's happening down in Louisiana. And this cut comes from Gary Chambers, pretty popular content creator on the internet. He has a lot of good political stuff. So this cut comes from him.
Allow race to predominate. I mean, the court said that the remedial map, the illustrative map, can't violate the court's redistricting decisions. And of course, there's the entire Shaw line.
I don't think that there's any dispute as to that point, but you know, we're a long way from racial predominance to have the plaintiffs come in with a map that, in order to remedy the race-based problem that exists, the violation of voting rights based on race, itself takes race into account.
Well,
that's what Milligan said 3 years ago.
The problem, I mean...
And that wasn't a stereotype issue, and it wasn't a kind of like we're based on past conditions issue. We're based on current conditions, which is that we just proved a violation of people's voting rights based on current conditions.
Stereotyping is always the main injury in a Shaw case. It's always the injury when race predominates.
But you're asking for changes to Section 2, which is not the Shaw case. That's the confusion.
Well,
I understood that the illustrative maps that the plaintiffs bring in the beginning of a Shaw case is part of their showing that we have a problem. They're illustrative. They're not what Louisiana picked in this case. They're not what the court requires. The court gives the state, once the violation is established, the opportunity to draw its own map. So they're just showing, like that's just a step that you have to do as a part of your showing that we do have this vote dilution problem in this situation. And as Justice Kagan says, that's all based on current information.
Well, but the question is, what's that is based on current information? It's not a showing of intentional discrimination.
Why does it need to be? Is your suggestion that the only thing that's worthy of remedying is the intentional discrimination by the state?
if the remedy is stereotyping and race-based.
Set aside what the remedy is. I just need an answer to the initial question, right? If I'm looking only at Section 2 world, we have a mechanism for identifying race-based vote dilution and other kinds of problems. Is your view that you only are entitled to some remedy for that if you demonstrate that the state intentionally is causing this to happen to you?
Well, that's not current doctrine under Jingles, but the problem is
that your argument? Is that what you're saying we have to do?
Our argument is that if you're going to allow a race-based remedy, it must be in response to intentional discrimination.
So you don't get a remedy for an actual dilution or problem with your vote, the kinds of things that Congress cared about and that the Constitution requires. You don't get a remedy unless this was intentional on the part of the state with respect to you.
Which is a constitutional vote dilution claim which people always can be bringing.
Thank you, counsel.
Now, when you listen to the justices talk, what's clear is that black voters in Louisiana are being violated. That the data shows you that there's a pattern in the voting history of white voters in Louisiana. Even when you separate the political parties and put us in Republicans and Democrats, white Democrats rarely want to vote for the black candidate according to the data. Now, there were folks who were saying that I was stereotyping those people. Well, Justice Kagan said that's not stereotyping. And there were other folks who were just saying, well, that's a correlation in the data. Well, Justice Kagan also said that doesn't matter because the data shows that there is a there. And if you see that something exists over a history and a pattern of time, it gives you a reflection or a window to see what's going on in your local community. There are people who say, well, they're not intending to be racist. If the impact or the end result is more racist outcomes for black people, it's a problem. And so I'm going to always challenge people to be thoughtful and mindful that race does play a part in these elections every single time. And the Supreme Court justices agree with me on that. Maybe you.
So let me say this, Amir, before I let you jump in. And so I would offer that a lot of the voter apathy that we would like to remove, for our watchers, right? That was part of our goal, right? That there's not a lot of voter apathy. I'm bringing that up because I think that some of the voter apathy that exists is not understanding situations like this. So because there's a lot of value where, people go as far as to say, vote because somebody died for your right to vote. Like, we don't use those extremes on this show. We highlight how your actual vote matters. We try to bring that consciousness to the table. But for those who are apathetic, these are the kind of moments that most of us are unaware of or don't pay attention to because this is not a federal thing. So I think Leo said it, where we love to dance around have romance with the federal conversations and not understand the local and state situations. So what's happening in New Orleans is all the way to the Supreme Court. I'm just giving a little context before I let you jump in this thing. It's all the way to the Supreme Court, which kind of highlights what Leo said. Pay attention to what's going on locally because that's where the real things are. I'm not on either side of what I just heard because that's why I got you here. Explain to me what I'm seeing there, but I definitely understand it's of importance.
So I'll use an analogy similar to what Leo did with China and Argentina. Imagine that a fully functioning democracy that wasn't encumbered by race or economics was an airplane that could fly at 30,000 feet. And imagine one of the main forces trying to keep that airplane from flying is called gravity, and that would be racism. Louisiana probably has the strongest gravity for that aircraft in the United States right now. And so the history of that state is a little bit different than it is across other states, and that history is ongoing. In fact, Louisiana probably has the strongest gravity since the Civil War, as well as the strongest gravity going right now today in terms of keeping that airplane called a free and functioning democracy from flying high. So what you're seeing is an argument made by the people of New Orleans to get that aircraft to fly at its highest altitude despite the gravity in Louisiana, which means that there are going to be some problems that need some remedies that are not necessarily the best thing for a state not named Louisiana. So you can't look at Louisiana and say, well, it should be like Massachusetts or California or Colorado. You have to look at Louisiana as Louisiana, and that means that you're seeing an argument that says very specifically, Black voters are denied the opportunity to exercise their full power as citizens because of the way the politics in that state have evolved over the last 150 years. That evolution is where that gravity has been not only maintained, but in many ways it's increased. Yes, there's no outright slavery, although you can go to Angola State Prison and answer that question differently. No, there's no outright discrimination, but the history of that state has so much momentum that you cannot see those problems in a vacuum or as part of the rest of, as you would as the rest of the nation. And so that argument is Black voters' ability to vote for whom they choose is diluted to the point where they're irrelevant to elections. And they have data to prove it. And the argument you heard from the representative that was being questioned by Justice Kagan and Justice Jackson is that perhaps the state's not intentionally, there's not a nefarious group of people in the state saying, yes, let's discriminate against Black people. Rather that it's unintentional, and therefore the remedies are different if it's unintentional, but the history of Louisiana is such that your unintentional effects are definitely just as much a problem as any intentional effects because of the history of that state.
The last thing you just said, I think, is something that is often missed in 2025. That's how something to a degree becomes systemic, which kind of moves it above the individual. Are you being racist? Are you intentionally? And I think that's an area that our country has failed to address often enough. And if you're on the right side of it or things going your way, you don't mind that going unaddressed. You don't mind it being diluted and say, are you saying I'm racist? Like you try to turn it, you reduce it down to the individual thing versus systemically how it plays out. And it's not to assume that it just playing out negatively in itself makes it systemic, because that's the reason why you hear in my opinion, the Supreme Court justices going back at the plaintiff. At least that's my perspective. Leo, your thoughts on everything?
No, I would agree. The healthy response to someone saying, are you saying that I'm racist, is to say, I'm having this discussion with you to determine your intent. And if it's not your intent to be racist, you might consider approaching it this way or considering these facts. If it's historical facts about Louisiana voting data, voting behavior of people based on race, class, whatever, then look at that data and see whether or not that data is still current and relevant. And because I would argue that, and so that's an important thing. Intention is important, but when it comes to the application of law and the rule of law, it's hard to judge intention, but it's important to have this discussion because it's about a higher level discussion of what kind of society and what kind of fairness do we believe in. But what you're seeing here, what you saw in Michigan on affirmative action, right? That people, one, don't believe in racism the way we used to believe in racism. So that's changing. There's a response called reverse racism that people have sometimes like brought up, and that means something. That's a signal. The whole DEI stuff, signal. We don't think it's about race. We don't want it to be about race. Our intention is to uphold the spirit of what Martin Luther King said, or uphold the spirit of equitable voting and equal access to voting. And we feel that perhaps white people are not getting equal access now. And maybe this representation is actually the antithesis of the idea of equal justice under the law. And maybe you're the ones who are stereotyping Black people and white people into a certain type of anthropomorphical representation. Skin color determines voting, or skin color determines how well you lead. This is all good. I'm here for it. I'm here for this conversation because there's a lot of truth that sometimes we just think the racial solution is the best solution. Sometimes it might be economic. Sometimes it might be engagement. Sometimes it might be that people using race need to get off their butt and go vote. I don't know. But Birmingham, Alabama, Mississippi, those are majority Black places.
Yeah, I know recently. Well, I think I saw Gary Campbell, I think I'm saying his name right, the guy that just gave us that cut. I saw a cut after that where he highlighted it just recently resulted in New Orleans not having a black mayor or whatever, based on what happened. Again,
Did they have a good mayor, though? Did they have a good mayor?
Go ahead.
Did they have a good mayor? Pianke is, I get the sentiment that you shouldn't base it on. Nobody's qualified because of their skin color. They should be qualified whether or not they can represent the voters. And if all the voters are white, if you're black and you can represent them well and they think so, they should vote for you. If all the voters are black and somebody Asian goes up, and you shouldn't say, well, they're not representing the black people because they're not black. I agree. This discussion needs to be had.
No, fair enough. Let me go to one.
You won't get any argument from me, Leo. I'll just say it this way, that when you study Louisiana, you recognize that history is just so wild and weird that I don't like to have a discussion about politics without that context, because Louisiana is different. And I'm not saying bad, and it's not better or worse, but it is different. And until you have the historical part of the discussion, you're missing out on a lot of other stuff that needs to be said and heard.
I agree.
All right, good stuff. I already got y'all in as we call this for anybody watching. We're in our extra innings. We try to be an hour. We always extend a little bit, so we're in an extra inning. I got a 55-second cut from Van Jones that takes us completely off everything that we've been talking about. But if y'all got time, I'll let y'all both give one response and close us out, because I just think it's something that y'all would understand better than myself or even those watching. And I would be curious at what y'all say, because again, we also worry about the spin that a Van Jones would give it. But I wonder how accurate he is, if y'all will. If y'all don't have time, I can close y'all out. Y'all got a time for like maybe 3 more minutes? All right, cool. Okay. All right, this is only a 55-second cut. I just want to see what y'all think about this.
I think we're going to look back on today, historically, as a very big deal, because that image of Xi Jinping with Putin, with Modi from India, with the leader of Iran, with the leader of North Korea, that should send a chill down the spine of every American. That is a new world order.
Multipolar world.
They call it multipolar. I call it the West is now in a box. Don't forget, everybody doesn't like Henry Kissinger, but he did figure out a way to get us on the right side of the triangle. So it was United States and China together and Russia by itself. Now we're on the bad end of the triangle. It's everybody against us. That is not good for America. That is not good for Democrats, Republicans. And I think we've got that image is a feather in Putin's cap. It is a dagger pointed at the heart of the West.
Leo, spin, accurate, your thoughts?
No, I think he's acknowledging that there is a fight for a balance of global power, right? America's swinging a big stick under Donald Trump as president. Trump is actually trying to divide. Trump is actually trying to break those relationships up. It is not new. This is not a new thing that Russia is developing alliances with India or Pakistan, and more likely, and China. That's not new at all. That's stuff that Trump and other global economists have been very concerned about, or other people concerned about peacemaking have been very concerned about. So Van is really stating something that may not have been obvious to the average person paying attention to foreign policy, but that's old news. Trump has shaken that up. This is another one. This is a rejiggering. It is an important thing, because China, just ask Nigerians in Africa whether or not they enjoyed having a good relationship with China. So this has to be, Taiwan is another one. Ask those questions.
Emil, your thoughts to what Van Jones, again, what's spin, what's accurate, and we'll close it out, brother. Thank y'all both of y'all for a great show.
Yeah, no problem. BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa is the bloc that has formed in relation to the American hegemony, economic hegemony. That bloc is a target of the United States. But those nations were targets of the United States before they formed the bloc called BRICS. The reason why this is important for the average American is because our economic sovereignty is going to be challenged by this very clear new world order that you saw that picture of. this is ongoing. India has bought Russian or Soviet equipment for years. So has China. China has developed half of its defense was developed on Soviet and Russian design. So we're not talking about things that these are brand new. And Trump is not the only president to attack these brand new alliances. These are ongoing challenges that the United States is going to have to face. And President Trump, Biden did it. Obama had to deal with it. It's just going to be the status quo because these nations, two of whom have multi-billion person populations, right? Over 3 billion between India and China alone. There's going to be a change, a shift in how the world sees power. And the question is, whose side are they going to end up on? Or maybe the question is, are we going to end up on their side or not? Because they're going to shift the balance of power significantly. And the question is, can we benefit or are we going to be at arms? And those questions remain to be answered. And this president is one of many who is trying to answer it favorably for the United States.
Hey, good stuff. Thank y'all for a great show. We'll pop up on y'all next week. For anybody out there watching, share this to any of your friends. Again, our goal is to educate and raise the consciousness of politics for our community. And I think we did a good job of that today. So thank you, fellas.
Thanks, guys. Great show.
Hey.